Good evening, this is Jamie Drummond for Good Food Revolution. I'm here with winemaker António Maçanita from FitaPreta in the south of Portugal.
Alentejo.
And we're here to speak about your wine. You've had a whirlwind tour of Toronto. Tell us a little bit about your wine.
Okay, so we're producer from Alentejo, south of Portugal, inland, so it's 140 km from Lisbon if you go direction of Spain. It's a cool climate, but a warm climate with very warm nights, very cold, warm days, cold nights.
So let's just get that correct. It's what kind of climate is it? Just so you
it's a continental climate.
So you don't confuse the wine students who are listening to this right now.
Okay.
Explain it perfectly well.
Okay, so let's drive in 140 km from Lisbon, direction Spain, and we have a warm climate, continental. It is very warm days and very cold nights. So this is how it is. Soils vary a lot, so you have from schistty soils to clay granitic soils, and wines. Red wines tend to be rich, fruity, and white wines also tend to have that a lot of texture.
Historically, what type of wines were made there?
Well, it's the influence is Roman, so the Romans settled year 4 before Christ, and that's when the real industry of wine started. And so the clay pot came, the lagar, the fuse press.
When you say the clay pot, you mean the amphora?
Amphora,
yes.
Yeah. So in Portuguese we would say talha.
How do you say it? Sorry, how do you say that in Portuguese?
Talha.
Oh, okay.
So this is really the base of the region. After dictatorship, so we had Salazar years, most of the vineyards were removed, and it was our, I don't know if you say barnyard, it's like where we would get wheat, and so a lot of the wine got put aside, and now it's for the last 60 years it's been coming back.
So you have a lot of experience making wine all over the world, in France, in Australia, and elsewhere. What do you try to do, and what have you achieved at FitaPreta?
Okay. The different places of where I worked were more about really getting how are people working their grapes, how are they getting the best of their grapes. And when we get back to Portugal, we have 250 native indigenous grape varietals. So it's some things you can apply, some you can't. In the beginning, it was all about grabbing all this experience and putting it in. Now the responsibility is another one. It's grabbing what we have, what was back in the past, the varietals that we exist, and actually be able to put that in a bottle, transmit that in a bottle with all the talent that we have, so varietals and climate, but with something normally we lack, that is freshness and acidity.
So in your travels, what did you pick up and bring to Portugal?
Well, in California, a lot of things, so gravity flow versus pump flow. I did a research project on comparing gravity flow systems to pump flow systems, and so we do everything gravity flow. So nothing touches, no fruit touches a pump.
Do you have a pump in the winery? And be honest here, do you have a pump in the winery?
No, we have a pump in the winery. We don't have pump for grapes in the winery.
Okay.
And so when we say gravity flow, we're talking about solids. We're talking about grapes don't touch pumps. And so that was one thing. Second was a whole bunch pressed. From all the systems I've seen of whites, whole bunch pressed for whites is what I've identified better to. And so I brought that in.
Bringing structure to your white wines.
Most of all, giving me the capacity to put, for example, almost unripe fruit with ripe fruit in a press. That allows me to have fruit-driven aromas and acidity. If I was crushing it and putting it it through a pump system, I will be getting all the unripe characters of fruit, whereas in a press I can actually put it in and get the best of two worlds.
So perhaps that's what many of your forefathers were doing in your region when they were making white wine. So you basically took this into the new generation.
It's possible. So vineyards were mixed and probably were having exactly that. Ripe fruit and unripe fruit, because it was different varietals and they were with different ripening periods.
Do you still utilize field blends?
Yep. So mostly in white. So yeah, one of well, our main white vineyard is a field blend, and it has majority is António, Roupeiro, a little bit of Macanita, and it's a 20 to 30-year-old vineyard. So it's an old planting that has that characteristic.
Do you mind if I ask you a question one more time? Only because you said the varietals really quickly.
Okay.
Do you still have field blends going on in your vineyards?
Yes, on our main white grape vineyard, it's a field blend. It's a planting from between 20 and 30 years, and so there's a lot of different varietals in the same vineyard. So we have António, Arinto, and Roupeiro mainly on that vineyard, but I'm pretty sure we have other things there too.
What kind of treatments are you doing on the white wines? Because your region is not all that well known for their white wines, but the wines I tasted this evening were actually exceptional. I noticed you're doing some very different things there.
I think one is really this thing of respecting acidity. We have an easy way to get texture. You know, in a warm climate, it's easy to have good body, but we just generally lack freshness. And so this is step one. It's actually, like I said, getting grapes with acidity, with real acidity inside of the winery. Second is whole bunch. Whole bunch gives me two advantages. The one I've talked, of getting acidity, but the second is really the juice just clarifies. We need 12 hours to clean, to clarify. We don't need to add enzymes, we don't need to add anything to get it clean. Third thing is using yeasts that do not interfere with the fruit character. So I want a pure expression of the António, the Roupeiro. I want that into bottle, and I don't want all those happy aromas that are coming from yeast and not from the varietals.
When you're talking about yeast aromas from aromatic yeast, when we're talking about aromatic yeast aromas, what would you say those would be?
Well, the aromatic yeast aromas?
Yes.
It's very, the passion fruit, all the tropical characters, they're normally yeast driven and not, well, it depends on the varietals. You know, some varietals do have those characters. You can taste that on Sauvignon Blanc in the vineyard. So passion fruit is there for Sauvignon Blanc. But just, I think a lot of wines in the world are starting to just smell like passion fruit just because you're using yeast that can produce that.
Now you use a very neutral champagne yeast, or
Yes.
something similar to a champagne yeast.
So we want a straight fermenter. We want something that it's basically transforming sugar into alcohol. This is what we want. We want the varietals. They're if you look at the descriptors, they're very neutral varietals. And so if you do something, if you just grab something that can perturb that, you're not going to get the varietal anymore. And a lot of people say, António is this, is that, because there's too much, I say too much of a chef behind it. There's too much chefs, too many winemakers doing, impacting that characteristic. So what we're looking, for example, with our FitaPreta White and Macanita is just get that inside of the bottle, just get that expression inside of the bottle. And so in terms of winemaking for these wines, it's this. Your
wines perhaps perhaps have changed over the years that I've known them. And I think that's an evolution more than anything else. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. How would you explain that evolution?
They're changing every year. I'm changing, we are changing, so our perception of what's balanced changes, the perception of what's overripe and underripe changes.
Do you change your winemaking techniques according to the international market, or is it something that you do because you're simply trying to make the best wine you can?
It's a very good question that blends with a lot of things, not just, we don't do our wines to please the public, we do our wines to please ourselves. But this is, we cannot say do not contaminate it. Let's say, not just when we talk about FitaPreta, it's back to the roots. It's us, it's restaurants, it's art, it's decoration. It's not. It's a language that so it's, of course we're influenced by everything. So it's not, maybe 10 years ago we're in molecular food. Now we're probably in just trying to do what we have back home, what we have local, and just put it in as pure form as possible.
Yeah.
So I think that it's more of like, I cannot deny that I've not been, well, it's movies. That's the two latest, most talked movies are about something, going back to simple, going back to, and so it's...
So you're influenced by Skyfall. Your winemaking next year is going to be influenced by Skyfall.
Maybe.
And Moonrise Kingdom.
It's, what I'm saying is that, although I could come in here and tell you that it's an aesthetic exercise, so it's what I think it's beautiful. So I'm trying to do something I think it's beautiful, and to do that, I'm just saying that I get contaminated by the moment, and the moment includes a lot of things, and it's not. It is also wine related, but it's the phase that we're in, and so for me, I have this huge will to get our grape varietals well made, get our local aromas well expressed, do wines that have the balance that I like, and you say, well, my taste is of course influenced by a lot of things.
It's interesting to hear a winemaker who admits to being influenced by outside influences. Oh, that sounds like shit. It's interesting. It's interesting to speak to a winemaker who actually admits to having influence from outside his own little garden. So I really appreciate hearing that from you.
Thank you.
So where do you see Portuguese wine in the next 10 years?
I think there's this noise, this buzz every single place that I go. So people are saying, I don't understand why Portuguese wines are still not academy. They're not more. I think we're getting to this moment where the wines are really getting better. The people that are opinion makers about wine are liking the wines. Images are more contemporary. It's not. It's just like you look at a label. It's clean and it's more aesthetic pleasing. So I think these things are growing, and I think this is probably the last. Well, probably us in Greece is one of the last places in the world where you actually have things you haven't tasted, varietals you've never heard about. We have 250 grape varietals. It's insane, and so it's our talent and it's our fault. When I start giving a presentation, people say, "What? Toriga what?" Think that, and so we need to work on that. But I think it's the future. I'm happier to be if I could pick any place. I think I'm in a wine region that has so much to grow. If I was in Burgundy or if I was in Bordeaux, it's done. I'm not saying that there's not great wines and we don't want to discover them. Of course they are, but Portugal is still to discover. So I think we have a good future ahead of us.
Fruit Revolution. I'm sorry for throwing in all those awkward questions. And
No, thank you.
we look forward to catching up with you in Portugal.
Great, let's do that.
Take care. Good night.